Okay, so I'm going to walk you guys through how to set up your 3D print. This file will be located on in the Dropbox folder. A few ways to start figuring out how to set up your 3D print. The first thing you want to do is make sure that you have an actual closed polysurface. Um, a closed polysurface, and for 3D printing purposes, they normally call this like watertight. So, for example, if you were to take your model and dip it into water, no water would seep in. But if you happen to have any open polysurfaces, a couple ways to fix it. You're going to want to use the icon that's down here for the edge tools. And one thing you can use is you can select the open poly surfaces, and you can see there's two of them, and a couple ways to fix this. One of them is the very first icon, show edges. Make sure you have the naked edges, and it'll show you where the problem is happening. So here, if I zoom in, I can see that it's very small, but that entire edge is open. So I can see that that edge is open. One way to fix this, I'm going to explode the entire surface, and of course as soon as I do, it's showing me that I have all naked edges. But then I can just scale this up. And join the entire thing. And as soon as I do, it's telling me I don't have any more naked edges, and it's an actual closed poly surface. With this next example, again, I've already tested to see that it's an actual open poly surface. So I add the object, and this is where I have some naked edges. A couple different ways of fixing it. I can use any of my surface tools, network surface, or loft, or sweep to fix it. Or this one's simple enough where I can join two naked edges. It's going to tell me there's a gap. Do I want to join these? I click yes. This is not exactly the best way to join them, but it's a way to join them. So now if I go back here and I see that I actually have a closed poly surface, and it's giving me some errors in the actual model, but it's technically closed now. If you're going to actually 3D print something, like for example your design proposal, you want to make sure that you have one solid object. So in this case, say for example this is my design proposal for Studio. It's actually made up of a few different closed poly surfaces. What I want to do is select them all and join them all. Or I'm sorry, not join. Boolean union, sorry. So essentially what I have is one large closed polysurface instead of the individual polysurface. And if you want, it's probably a good idea to take one extra step and merge all coplanar faces just to clean up your model a little bit. So there's some basic ways of setting up the basic file, and just make sure you have a closed polysurface. The other thing with the 3D printer that we have, it's the Ultimaker. And you're going to want to, in the next part, you're going to want to, it's a free software that comes for the Ultimaker. You're going to want to download it and install it. It's just called Cura. And to be on the safe side for 3D prints, maximum size is 200 millimeters by 200 millimeters by 200 millimeters. You'll notice that down here I'm actually in millimeters. So the best thing to do is just make a new file, make sure you're in millimeters, and copy and paste your existing file in here, and just make sure it's again less than 200 by 200 by 200. And once you actually have your poly surface, you're going to want to convert it into a mesh. The 3D printer doesn't understand poly surfaces, so you just select your object, come over here, turn this into a mesh. You know, the least amount of polygons, it'll look really faceted. Too many polygons, it might take a while to print. So just go like somewhere in the middle. Select the mesh. And now it takes the entire thing and it's actually faceted. And this is what you need to take to that Cura software. So make sure again that it's a closed mesh. And we're going to export it as an STL file. So export selected. Let's see, give it a name. And I want to make sure that I save it as an STL file. There you go. Stereolithography. Save it. Just use the default settings, hit OK. So now what I want to do is I want to open up that file in that Cura software. So while this is opening, essentially what you're going to need to turn in is you're going to need in one Rhino file. Just make sure you have, wrong one. In one Rhino file, just make sure you have your actual module. That's a polysurface, it's a closed polysurface, converted into a mesh. So turn in the Rhino file and turn in the STL file. So turn in the actual STL file. And once in the Cura software, just a couple things to note. It'll automatically lay it flat for you as best as possible. If you want, you can try a couple of different options. Come over here to Fast Print. And go to Layers. Just waiting for it to stop. There it is. And it'll show you in the way that's going to actually print, where it starts and the way it actually sets up the print. You could also, so you go back to normal mode, print support structure. Which will probably be pretty handy to print the support structure. You can rotate this and lay it flat. If you needed to at this point, you can scale it. You can mirror it. But the main thing that you're trying to just do, set up, is make sure that it's flat as possible. A fast print, even a fast print, you can see how long it's going to take. And what you're really paying attention to is the layer. So the blue is the path of the 3D printer. And the yellow, what you see, anything that you see in yellow is like the support structure inside your model. You'll never really see it unless you cut your model in half. The red is the layer that you actually see. And the blue is just a support structure, which once your model is finished 3D printing, you just snap it off. And once you're happy with the basic setup, you just go to, you have to export this to get it ready for the 3D printer. Save G-code. You know, just save it on your desktop, 3D test 3D print G-code, and save. So essentially, that's the file that you need. This test 3D print G-code. This is the file that you actually need to actually send to the 3D printer. So unless there's any other questions for now, just try to, again, set up your file where you turn in your Rhino file and you have the closed poly surface, the mesh, and you export it as the STL file, and you have the G-code file. So you'll have the those three basic files.